The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walked this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, we will call our regular council meeting for September 17th, 2024 to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Now, council, make note, item 11.1, the closed session legal advice, pertains to item 6.5 under action items today. And at the time of calling item 6.5, I will be calling for a motion to go into closed session. Unless any councilors are opposed, that is how we will handle that situation today. Council, are there any other changes to the agenda this evening? Administration, any other changes to the agenda this evening?
No changes from administration.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Council, could we get a motion to accept the agenda as presented? Councilor Chambers.
I'll make the motion that we accept the agenda for the September 17th regular council meeting as presented.
Thank you, Councilor Chambers. Council, the motion on the floor is that council accept the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Councilor Taylor voting in favor by hand, and that motion is carried unanimously. I'll take us to item 3 or section 3 of our agenda this evening, council minutes for adoption. Councilors? Councilor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we adopt the regular council minutes for September 3rd, 2024, and the committee of the whole minutes for September 10th, 2024.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, the motion on the floor is the council adopt the minutes for the regular council meeting of September 3rd, 2024, and committee of the whole meeting September 10th, 2024. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Councilor Taylor in favor by hand. That motion is carried unanimously. We'll take us to section 4 of the agenda this evening, Citizens Minute with Council. Minute with Council provides an opportunity where residents can address council regarding issues, events, celebrations, or concerns. To ensure a constructive and welcoming environment, please adhere to the following guidelines. Keep your remarks concise, limited to 1 minute. Address the chair of the meeting when speaking to council. Avoid asking questions as this is not a Q&A session. Maintain a respectful tone and language. For Minute with Council this evening, we have Mr. Cole Garner, and I believe he is speaking towards item 6.5 on our agenda this evening. Mr. Garner.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Hinton Town Council. My name is Cole Gorner. I reside at 146 Fuller Place. Thank you again for the chance to present and discuss the pickleball noise issue during the most recent council meeting. I enjoyed the opportunity to engage in meaningful discussions. Thank you, Jen Davy Campbell, for all the support you provided to me in preparing and delivering the presentation. And thank you, Councillor Magoon, for the notice of motion you brought forward. My neighbors and I appreciate the support. Mr. Mayor, I've had you and Councillor Race visit my residence to experience the noise. Additionally, I've spoken with other members of Hinton Town Council, and the most common concern I've heard is that the sound barriers may not be effective in mitigating the noise to an acceptable level. To that, I would respectfully respond that in virtually every sound mitigation effort that I've researched, sound barriers are a part of the solution. Since the meeting, I've gathered a number of signatures from my neighbors to further support this effort. Also, I got a note from the Hinton Pickleball Association President Stuart Lawton. He expressed agreement with the suggested 9 to 9 operating hours and mentioned that there may be other ways the club could help. And I resolved the last point I had. I had a quick chat with Ed Midden before the meeting here, speaking about collaborating for the report that the motion speaks to. I was asking for a follow-up meeting with administration to speak about the issue. Thank you for your time today and for your efforts in serving the community.
Thank you, Mr. Gorner. That will take us to section 5 of the agenda this evening, delegations and presentations, and item 5.1, Y Station FCSS Comparative Analysis Presentation. I believe both of our presenters are online today.
We are here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. Esteemed members of council, Anthony, my colleague, will be, there we go, sharing his screen. So we're going to do our best to make the most of our time today. We're going to hop right into just our objectives for the study. I'm sure you're well aware that we were contracted by the town of Hinton to do comparisons of the town of Hinton and at least 4 of the named comparator municipalities in terms of their social service provision, funding, and some of those other items. The data that we did gather on the program levels for these FCSS type programs, and we put that in quotes, we will elaborate a little further on that as we go through, but we did look at core versus non-core program levels, program areas, program delivery models, staffing levels, and revenue features. And really the result of the study was for us to come back with some recommendations in relation to adjusting the social services, improving efficiency, or providing other targets or suggestions that we uncovered while we were doing this research on your behalf. Our methodology was really a multi-mode, multifaceted type of approach. We did begin by doing an online survey that was sent to all 7 municipality comparisons, as well as Hinton. An introductory email was sent forwarding in advance, introducing Y Station and the purpose of the project. And municipalities have been offered a copy of the final report as an incentive for their participation. All in all, Edson, Hinton, Morinville, Rocky Mountain House, Westlock, and Whitecourt completed the survey. After that, we also did some follow-up in-depth interviews, and these in-depth interviews really provided a lot of the color and the flavor behind some of the numbers, and really provided us with some additional data points, as well as some additional information to flesh out our recommendations. So they provided a lot of that information. Some of these interviews were 30 minutes in length. Some of them were an hour or longer. And so we had some really good time with the individuals that provided us with that time and information to be able to move forward with our report. So we do want to thank all of the participating municipalities, and that included, of course, Hinton, Edson, Rocky Mountain House, Morinville, and Whitecourt completed those interviews. In addition to those primary methods, we did have some secondary research. So a lot of hunting around on websites. Some municipalities provided documentation and other online information was utilized. And this scan was really to uncover some of the relevant themes, do some digging in around the budgets, and looking at social service challenges in Alberta, as well as in those specific municipalities that we consulted with. We do also want to set the stage, though, that as with every study, there are limitations and considerations, and we just want to put those out there before we go into our findings. So social services and FCSS more specifically can be structured very differently depending on the municipality. Some have standalone FCSS services, where others, FCSS is a larger or housed within a larger community service department, making comparisons challenging. And the analogy I'm going to use here is that it's not just apples to oranges, it's apples to oranges to a pen, to a cell phone, and some scissors. Like, there were really a lot of variation across the municipalities. So we did do our best to really boil everything down as best we could to make those comparisons valid, as well as really informational or valuable to you as the end user of this information. As well, some municipalities readily acknowledge that some of the social service objectives or events are partially, or in some cases, co-shared or planned with other areas or communities. So an example of this would be in Whitecourt, of course, they have Woodlands County that surrounds them. Some of those services that they provide are provided in partnership with those partnering municipalities. So it's really important for us to keep in mind that some of those shared events or shared supports, those are very difficult for us to disaggregate when we look at the numbers that we're able to provide you with today. So that being said, let's go right ahead and hop into some of our key findings. And another limitation here is that given those limitations, while comparing all 7, we did identify that there were 3 municipalities that were worth some additional consideration. Edson, Whitecourt, and to a degree Drayton Valley seem to offer those best comparisons to Hinton. And the reasons for that really is because all of them have their SCSS housed within a larger department. They are all service hubs for the surrounding community. They are all more regionally similar and are removed from major urban centers like the city of Edmonton. And they provide more core and non-core programs than other municipalities in our comparative base. So now we're hopping into results. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Get excited. So we wanted to start really with how close are the apples and the oranges? So it was really important for us to look at that. So Hinton provides 35 core programs in their FCSS service delivery portion, or the social services that they provide. When we look at our comparators, Edson is at 20. 20 of those are direct, 6 are indirect in Edson. 16 in total are provided in Morinville. All of those are directly provided. Rocky Mountain House has 20 in total. 8 would be direct, 12 would be indirect. Westlock, again, 23 and 23. And Whitecourt actually provides 83 and 83, and all of those are direct service provision. When we look at the number of non-core programs provided, again, Hinton, very similar to Whitecourt, 24 of those non-core programs are delivered. In Whitecourt, we have 27, Edson has 6, and Morinville has 1 when we were looking at those comparisons. Here is the rub, here is the crux of the analysis that we completed, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this graphic so that we're all in the same place. So we've provided all of the comparative information to contextualize the findings that we had. We started with population. So the population, of course, in Hinton, 9,872, and we're looking at 6,700 in Drayton, 8,400 in Edson, and just over 10 in Whitecourt. And also looking at the population growth over the past 10 years. Median age, all really quite similar. Whitecourt a little bit on the lower side in terms of median age. In terms of tax base, we had a range from 47% in Hinton, 42% in Drayton, 63% in Edson, and 43% in Whitecourt. When we look at the service departments, so the community service departments, and this is again where we chose these comparators as being the most appropriate. So the Community Services Department, of course, in Hinton, I'm sure you're very familiar, houses FCSS, Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and then transportation. So both public transit and the Freedom Express. In Drayton Valley, the Community and Recreation Services Department houses FCSS, Community Development, Affordable Housing, Family Liaisons, Community Services, and things like the library, the theater, other rec facilities and centers. Edson, the Community Services Department includes FCSS, but also Community Development, Culture, the Leisure Center, and Parks and Facilities. And in Whitecourt, the Community Services Department houses FCSS eligible programs, other social services, and transit. And so now I think you can see a little bit about why some of these comparisons are a little bit on the challenging side when we look straight across the board. Now, that being said, when we look at the expenditure on behalf of the municipality, in Hinton, there is a $511,000 total municipal expense that is spent on that was spent in 2023, very similar to Edson at $532,000, and in Whitecourt at $608,000 total municipal expense. Drayton Valley, again, a little bit on the different side with only $96,000 total municipal expense in terms of what is on the onus of the municipality. Another way of looking at it was really to look at the tax support by municipality for every dollar in property tax gathered. In Hinton, 0.04 cents on the dollar is spent on public health. Coaldale is 0.4. Edson is lower than really 1 cent for every dollar. Morinville is 9 cents. Rocky Mountain House less than $1. Whitecourt is again 4 cents, but that's community support services and transit. And Drayton Valley would be less than $1 with 3 cents of every dollar spent on community services. Again, the number of FTEs, or the number of employees, when we look at both the delivery of core and non-core social services and programs, Hinton is at 11, Edson is at 3, Morinville is at 4.4, Rocky Mountain House is at 2, Westlock is at 5, and Whitecourt is at 13. So really what we've cruxed based on all of this information that we have, we heard this and wanted to base some recommendations, but we also heard a number of interesting ways that people are both planning, managing their different FCSS and larger community services departments. Some of the recommendations that we had is considering the development of a strategic plan specifically for FCSS that aligns the town's overall mandate, vision, mission, strategic goals, and objectives related to FCSS. Almost all of the municipalities we spoke with, these strategies are used as the backbone for decision making. And when they look at core, non-core, what's in scope, what's out of scope, these strategies serve as the guiding document that is very, very beneficial for these decisions about FCSS. So again, this strategy could really provide direction with regards to the approach, to the alignment of core and non-core social services to the community's needs. Another thought was to increase transparency about how decisions are made when considering new program adoption, or how new programs are balanced through fiscally responsible cuts to other areas. So again, it was really just use that strategy, and then that allows you to increase that transparency when you're thinking about new program adoption. Continue to elevate the objectives and outcomes of each FCSS service and program. So I have to say Hinton does a very good job of evaluating the programs, of ensuring that the money that is spent, that they have a very good program to program assessment of the outcomes of those spends. And then they also know the return on investment. So we did pull in some secondary research, which allowed us to look at the dollars spent and what those dollars mean in terms of return on investment to dollars that would have to be spent if those FCSS dollars were not invested. Again, some more recommendations. Consider pursuing alternate revenue streams, particularly for non-core programs where appropriate. In some municipalities, that means user fees. In some municipalities, that means pursuing sponsorship outside of the normal government channels from private industry or private business. There's a lot of creative things that are happening out there in terms of pursuing alternative revenue streams. I do know that Hinton does some additional or excellent work in terms of pursuing grant opportunities that are outside of those normal grant funding dollars. And a lot of SCSS departments are supporting their agencies, supporting their programming with those additional funding opportunities or streams. So short-term grant funding carries the risk of not being a reliable source of revenue. And I mean this as if the government decides that there's an initiative they would like to pursue, there are dollars attached to that, but in a lot of cases, those dollars have a limited time span. They might last for a year or 2 years, but after those 2 years, there's the challenge of what do we do now? And so it is really important, I think, going forward to carefully consider whether those short-term grant funds are worth the risk. Because one of the challenges, of course, that you will face is if you have to sunset a program after 2 years, there can be some backlash from the community on why did you offer it for 2 years and now you're not going to continue with that funding going forward. That is one of the challenges I think that's faced by many, many FCSS departments, particularly with emergent needs. Also, that it would be very important to include communications planning if that is an opportunity that you have to be able to let folks know why a program is being discontinued, if there's a decision not to put additional municipal dollars towards a continuation of that program. So in theory, it's great to pursue some of those funding opportunities from the province, but it can be a double-edged sword when after the 2 years, there's no continued funding that goes behind some of those programs. One of the municipalities, or actually a couple of them, are purposefully allocating portions of their annual budget to innovation or new and emerging needs. And this is a percentage of their budget. Again, if that newer emerging need budget isn't used by the end of the year, what they do is redistribute those funds to some of their existing programs with what they call a top-up. So they do a top-up close to the end of the year if something didn't emerge or come on the radar in the first three quarters of the year. There are economies of scale. So having the FCSS housed in a larger community department does really allow for some additional administration support. There's a little bit of shifting in between those departments, which really does allow you to maximize the FCSS dollars that you have and putting those dollars directly into program provision or service provision. In the places where we saw standalone FCSS departments, there was significant challenge, and a lot of the work that was done by some of the FTEs was more administration than anything else. So having it housed in a larger department where you're sharing some administration support or some other opportunities does really allow you to maximize the use of your FCSS funds. And then our last recommendation is really to continue to seek out opportunities to partner, collaborate, and share costs. And this can be both with other levels of government, but also with the private sector in terms of pursuing sponsorship opportunities for certain types of programs. And again, this could involve also strengthening your relationships with your nearby municipalities and counties, and involving them potentially in some of the FCSS strategic planning on a regional level, as opposed to just your municipal level. And those were our key recommendations from our study. Are there any questions?
Council. Councillor Haas.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have, I have a few questions, but I'll start with the first one. Couldn't help notice that under the FTEs, Drayton Valley wasn't included in that. I'm just curious how they, where they stand with staff.
That's a great question. Anthony, I'm going to have you speak to that one if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the information we provided in the presentation today was based on mostly on survey data for the most part, especially those charts. So when they came to those, you know, we had 6 municipalities, including Hinton, fill out the survey. So that's what we did show. In terms of Drayton Valley, there was not any public information we could find in terms of exact number of employees for all social services. We could probably find number of employees for like underneath the core FCSS, but we would not be able to find like number of, or it'd be difficult to find number of employees for Drayton Valley for more like non-core social services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor.
The information you presented on total municipal expenses, why are those numbers different from the deficit numbers that are presented on page 14 of your report? So revenues are subtracted from expenses.
Anthony?
I would have thought they would have been the same number. I'm sure every councillor would have thought that.
Yeah, so there are multiple ways we collected financial information. One of the ways was through the survey. And so we asked our municipal contacts to say, okay, based off all of their core and non-core services, what are your revenues? What are your expenses? And then they would provide, you know, we get that deficit number in those instances. So that's what you're seeing, if I believe is what you're referring to on page 14 of the full report. What we provided also in the report was expenditures based on budgets. So budgetary documents based on secondary sources. So you'll see in like operational budgets, there will be lists of municipal expenses for either the community services department as a whole, and it's sometimes broken down by those individual sub branches. So really the differences you see are the different ways we collected the data, whether that's through the primary research through the survey or referencing secondary sources. And
Can
there are limitations with each approach.
I follow up?
Yes.
Well, the information on page 14, that table shows that we run a 66% deficit of expenses over revenues, whereas all the other adjoining communities with expenses over revenues on average run a 13% deficit. In other words, we run a 500% greater deficit than the other communities. Is that a correct interpretation of what I'm looking at?
Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, so according to the primary research we collected, Hinton's expenses are much greater than the revenue comparative to the other municipalities we compared in that figure on page 14. Given the limitation that the municipal contacts that filled out the survey did not always have, I guess, insights on the non-core services, or nor necessarily were confident enough to break down certain administrative expenditures. So I think it's really important that you take the primary research on that table 14 as well within the context of the below figure table on, sorry, page 17.
Well, they're just completely different numbers. That's all. So hard to draw conclusions.
They show similar trends. Sorry, go ahead, Tracy.
I was just going to mention that was one of our limitations that we really struggled with. Budgets are presented in so many different ways. We did our best to make those comparisons. So we did look at it from two different perspectives, and unfortunately, that did result in two different sets of numbers in cases when we were looking. In our interviews, we did our best to clarify those discrepancies, but we didn't always get the information that we were seeking when we were doing those interviews. So I certainly understand your concern and your frustration. I think we've done our best to present it in the ways that made the most sense. But it really depends on the perspective that you were looking with in terms of the clarity that we were able to provide.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, in looking at on your presentation, slides 6, 7, and 8, something that came to mind when I was looking at the data. So comparative to Edson specifically, Hinton offers more core programs. And then comparatively on the next slide, Edson offers less non-core programs delivered. However, they have a very similar overall municipal expense. Edson to the tune of 532,000, comparative to Hinton 511,000. But then the piece that jumped out at me, and I'm curious about it, and this is my question, was that on slide 10, the number of FTEs to support the delivery of core and non-core, Edson has 3 FTEs, whereas comparatively we have 11. And so I guess my question is, does that mean that Edson is utilizing more, call it side of the desk personnel from other departments to shoulder the delivery of those particular services?
That's such a great question. And I'm going to jump in and then I'll let Anthony correct me if I'm wrong. How does that sound? So there are a couple of things that you're reading into there. Of course, one of them is the difference between direct and indirect service delivery. So in Hinton, of course, compared to Edson, all of those services are directly provided by Hinton, where in Edson, 6 of those services are indirectly provided, which means that they are funding an agency which is then providing the service. So there's that perspective. And then you are absolutely correct. In Edson, there are multiple FTEs that are, how do I say, begged, borrowed, and stolen to help out with certain types of things. So you're definitely seeing the apples and orange challenges that we faced. So between that direct, indirect service ratio, as well as those beg, borrowed, and steal, we did our best to account for those FTEs in the way that made the most sense. But that's a great insight and a great catch there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you. And I don't know if this is a question for the presenters or for our admin, but I guess for purposes to understand both for ourselves and the public, the difference between non-core, core, and then that direct and indirect. What is the difference between those? So because I mean, I'm looking at Hinton has 35 programs according to slide 6, and we have no indirect programs. And then on the next slide, we have 24 of those 35 are non-core programs. So I guess, I don't know if I need an example of what that represents. And yeah, I just found that it maybe might be helpful, maybe just for me, but.
I
Tracy?
believe my friend Anthony actually probably knows this now better than anybody else on my entire team. So I will let him jump into that conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Council. The term core and non-core is really tricky, and it's something that is a great question to ask, because that's really why these comparisons are difficult as well. Core services are anything that's covered by provincial grant funding, so that 80-20 funding that the government provides. So there are certain eligibility criteria to be eligible for that 80-20 funding. So one example of core services and programs in Hinton is the home support program, where it uses that provincial grant funding, that 80-20 provincial grant funding. Where 80% is covered by the province, 20% is covered by the municipality. Non-core services and programs are those not eligible and do not use provincial grant funding. So for example, there are a few services in Hinton that are non-core, such as the out-of-school childcare program. When it comes to direct and indirect service delivery, that is more related to a service model approach. So a municipality can deliver both either core or non-core, either directly or indirectly. Directly basically means the municipality is taking on the lead or the responsibility to deliver these programs and services. Partnerships can still occur during direct delivery, and often does occur during direct delivery with other organizations within the community. Indirect service delivery was when municipalities refer to those other organizations, those other agencies on contract, and the funds for these services are solely given to an agency or group to run the program or service.
Okay, thank you. So what you're saying is we have no, in Hinton, that you found any indirect services?
All of your services are provided directly. That is correct. Yeah. And there is some reasons we found other municipalities have adopted a similar approach, that direct approach. And that's mostly because of consistency of programs and long-term quality of programs. Usually it seems from what we've gathered, especially through the in-depth interviews, that direct service approach leads to usually long-term better outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I just want to say thank you for your presentation. I think looking across the region, I was wondering how you would be able to come up with some comparables and be able to bring this down, because it's such a different thing. And I think your recommendations are concise. I think the biggest one for me as a councillor is looking at the development of that strategic plan specifically for FCSS for the community, but taking in a broader look at the region, I think is important to see what the region's doing, but also not handing that off where your community has the opportunity to be watered down by other initiatives of the region. I think that FCSS in Hinton has done a very good job of delivering programs within the community that are effective. I like the direct approach. I think it's been done very well here. And it leads itself well to, I think, that ability, you know, to work hand in hand with that ongoing strategic plan that, you know, hopefully we'll continue to work with to see where that goes. I think that it's also very difficult to dive down into the numbers and the FTEs and all those things, because even if two communities had the same population and they both serve 35 programs, those programs aren't going to look the same. And they'll have different uptake. They'll have different needs of the clients. They'll have, you know, all these different things. So I think it's really difficult, you know, for us to look at that. But again, I think you did a good job of trying to level that out as much as possible. But I do think that understanding what our core needs are and then being able to move ahead to help FCSS to make sure that what they're applying for in some of these one-off short-term grants, is it really worth the time and energy of these shorter-term programs? Is it really aligning with our outcomes as a community? Is it going to give us the best long-term help? Is it going to blend into something that we can be sustainable in long-term? Those are the things I think we really have to make sure that we're putting our resources in the right places for the long-term care of the community, not necessarily jumping on the whim of the current government and whatever they're handing out. I think sometimes, I'm not saying FCSS, but in general, we get excited to see grants and we want to help and do things, but making sure that the decisions that we're making moving forward is really in alignment with the long-term strategy of the community, not just what happens to be out there today. So I appreciated what you put together, and looking forward to hopefully helping to implement some of the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one more question, and maybe you can or can't answer it. I'm not sure. But when you were doing the comparisons, one of the things, I think, questions that always come up when programs like this is measuring outcomes, measuring, did you find that other communities in comparison to Hinton or ways in which those measurements are gathered, any recommendations or anything you found in your research?
I'm going to be honest with you. I think of all of the municipalities we surveyed or researched, Hinton has one of the most robust outcome measurement programs in place. So all of the funds, all of the work that they do, they track the outcomes. They at least track the outputs, which is the number of people served, the number of individuals, the number, you know, all of the different interventions and different services that they provide. They have an excellent program of recording and accounting for those outcomes. Some of those, don't get me wrong, are very challenging. Some, especially event-based types of activities, those can be very challenging to track, as well as the outcome or the impact of those. I do know that, again, some of those are tracked very, very well in other municipalities and not so well in others. Some municipalities tend to do needs assessments on a 5-year rotating basis in their FCSS programs, where they track the input, they track the gaps, that type of thing. But in terms of accountability, Hinton has a very rigorous and robust accountability system in place. So they are, I would say, on the leading edge of that particular skill and that particular component of their SVSS programming. And that is one of the strengths of direct service provision, is that it does allow them to really account for where is the time going, where are the dollars going, and how are the people being served. So I do have to say Hinton has a very good system in place at this point in time for accountability.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Taylor.
We taking on more government services and programs than other communities, the comparable communities?
That's an excellent question. I would have to defer to Anthony on this just a little bit. I wouldn't say necessarily that you're taking them on an annual by annual basis. I do know that there have been some programs that Hinton has taken on some additional funding for, where the other municipalities have not. If it is not in line with their strategic plan, and the one example I will use is Rocky Mountain House. They are a hard stop. They will not pursue funding if it does not match with their strategic plan. So I would say that there's maybe one or two programs that Hinton has taken on that has been a little bit different from some of the other municipalities, but I do think that in all cases, Hinton has identified the need in the community to be able to pursue those funds. So I wouldn't say that Hinton has pursued funding for funding's sake in any instances. There has always been a need, an established and validated need behind the pursuit of some of those dollars. So I think there have been opportunities where Hinton FCSS has absolutely turned down provincial funding dollars. The issue, I think, is that in the absence of a really strong strategic plan, sometimes it's difficult to be able to identify if the funding that is offered is warranted given a need in the town of Hinton. So that's probably where there's just a little bit of a disjoint at this point, is without that guiding strategic document that aligns with the strategy of the municipality, it can be really difficult for them to decide, do we have this need in Hinton or not? Does that make sense?
Councillor Taylor, follow up?
Yeah, the follow-up would be, so we are taking on more programs than other communities. Is one of the reasons for that perhaps because are we taking on more provincial government responsibilities for programs that the communities aren't funding? So as the government over the years has defunded it, we have just not, we've said, okay, we're going to still carry that on. Is that one of the reasons for these differences in numbers that we're seeing here?
Anthony, I'm going to defer to you on that specific item.
Yeah. We've seen all the municipalities we've surveyed have generally agreed that they are facing increasing pressures to over-contribute to these core services. We have seen, we've heard, sorry, Councillor Terry, can you repeat your question again? Apologies.
Councillor Taylor?
Well, are we accepting more provincial government programs that are really the responsibility of provincial governments that have been downloaded to us that we have just taken on, where other communities have said, no, the provincial government's no longer funding that, so we won't take that on?
I would say, yeah. So all municipalities that we've surveyed would agree that they are doing more to cover services and programs that the provincial government no longer offers. In some cases, Hinton does offer more services and core programs, as Tracy was mentioning earlier. These programs vary on a municipality by municipality basis. So we do see Hinton taking up programs in certain cases where other municipalities might take a harder stop line.
And I'll jump back in on that. So when I spoke with Whitecourt in particular, I'm just going to use that as an example. They are very, very careful if they pursue government funding. And they have two conditions to pursue a provincial government funding for services that may be downloaded from the provincial government. The first is it has to have a minimum of 2 years worth of funding, as well as a third year of transitional funding, or Whitecourt does not look at it. And this is through the in-depth interview. Rocky Mountain House will not pursue anything outside of their strategic mandate, regardless of whether that is what they consider a core municipal service or whether that would be something they would consider something that is more in the realm of the provincial government. So that strategic plan in both of those cases does allow them to have more of a hard stop on whether they pursue those funds. So those documents are really the backbone that they use to make those decisions with their boards. And those boards are also the group that would identify whether the need is substantial enough for that FCSS or community services department to pursue it. So there is a lot of variation, but we are finding with the municipalities that many of them are having to make these difficult decisions and leaving government funds or initiatives on the table more often than we have seen in the past, because those pressures to continue to provide what they are already providing is becoming more and more challenging. And so those initiatives, I think, are becoming less and less attractive to FCSS departments across the board. Does that answer the question, Councillor Taylor?
Councillor Taylor? Yes, thank you, Tracy. And Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one more. On the note of strategic plan, who do you recommend is at the table of strategic planning? Is that an administration or is that a combination of administration and council? What is other communities doing in regards to how they develop those strat plans?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. Again, it depends on the municipality. Many FCSS departments or community service departments have advisory boards. On those boards, the makeup of those includes administration, in some cases includes council, in some cases includes key agencies in the community. It really depends on the municipality. And I would love to say that everybody has the same mix, the same group of folks, but they're all from soup to nuts different. But in many cases, those are done in a combination of municipal administration, as well as in some cases, council can be in or out of those. And then in some cases, well, in a lot of cases, it is the agencies, the key agencies in the community, particularly in communities where there is indirect service provision. Those members are sitting at the table. So those tend to be the individuals that are involved in the strategic planning process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Taylor.
I'm concerned that we have two tables that seem to contradict each other, as I mentioned before. The table on page 14, which says we're overspending expenditures versus revenues versus all other programs by a substantial amount. And another table that says we're spending the same from at least two other communities. If we look at municipal expenses there. If I made a motion to ask administration to work with you to sort out this financial discrepancy, would you be able to?
And I'm going to defer to you because I'm not sure we can get much more than we already have in-house. Anthony, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we are limited to the data that we collected, and as mentioned previously, there are limitations to the primary survey data collected, as well as the secondary sources collected. We would be more than happy to send council like the exact sources of those secondary research sources for table 4. But in terms of finding additional information, I think we've used what we had available.
I think our biggest challenge on these particular items, Councillor, is when they are housed within a community services department, it is very, very difficult for us to disaggregate the FCSS data in some cases using publicly available documents. So we do have to rely on our respondents to provide that information, and it was provided, I would like to say, in an inconsistent manner, so that it would be really difficult without additional information provided by some of the municipalities for us to make those comparisons. So I guess my nice way of putting this is, without someone giving us access to information that we don't have access to, even after all of this time and work, we wouldn't be able to resolve that discrepancy at this point in time.
Thank you, Tracy. And CO Panasic.
Through the mayor, members of council, I don't think a motion would be needed, but I have marked it down and just making sure that we're clear on the numbers that we want to rely on going forward to making decisions. We'll take that back. We'll make sure that we provide some additional context and information for council.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Councillor Taylor, are you satisfied with the response?
That sounds fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, is there anything further for our presenters today? Seeing nothing, thank you very much, Tracy and Anthony, for your presentation today, and thank you for sticking around and answering some questions.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You have yourselves a wonderful evening.
You as well.
Okay, Council, given that there is nothing further for item 5.1 on the agenda today, we'll move to section 6 action items. Item 6.1, ATCO Gas 2025 franchise fee. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. This, both of the next two items will go to Ms. Barbeau.
Thank you, Council. So before you this evening, we have franchise fees for both ATCO Gas as well as Fortis Electric. As you recall from the presentation during committee that annually local governments have an opportunity to adjust the franchise fees, which is an additional or other revenue source for the community. Franchise fees can be looked at as a fee for using municipal right-of-ways, compensation for the disruption utility work may prove to be in existence throughout the year, and as well a mechanism to generate revenue from entities that are otherwise exempt for property taxation, such as schools, churches, hospitals. So focusing now on the ATCO Gas franchise fee, during the presentation at Committee of the Whole last week, there was a question raised that how close was the 2023 actuals to the forecasted revenue provided by ATCO. And in 2023, the forecast for the town of Hinton franchise fee revenue was $385,157. The actual revenue received for the year was $363,679. So approximately $21,000 difference. The second question that was raised during committee is what would the franchise fee have to be to generate the forecasted revenues for 2025 again. So at 11.5%, franchise fee would generate forecasted revenue of $388,000, bringing the 2025 revenues within $1,300 of the projected 2024 revenues. The recommendation before council today is to maintain the ATCO franchise fee at 12%. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Barbeau. Council, any questions or motions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that council direct administration to reduce the franchise to reduce the franchise fee to 11.5% of the ATCO for ATCO Gas. And as I understand it, that makes it revenue neutral and pretty close to what we collected in 2024.
Through the chair to all of council, according to the forecaster that I was using, that would put us within about $1,300.
That's what I heard. Okay. And yeah, so I speak in support of that?
You go right ahead.
Sure. So I see these fees really as compulsory taxes. They're buried in our utility bills, and between the two of them, the gas and the electrical, we bring in 1.8 million, or about $35,000 per week into the town's bank account. This very lucrative tax is partially hidden and not as open as property taxes, and such has an appeal for politicians as a revenue source. To make matters worse, we pay GST on this fee, which is a tax on a tax. That means that for that 1.8 million, we're paying, our citizens are paying 90,000 GST on the franchise fee tax. These are fees that taxpayers, that our ratepayers have no choice to pay if they want electricity and natural gas. The town needs extra money. Let's instead focus on taxes that are visible and transparent, like property taxes. Accordingly, I only support options that at best are neutral with what we've done before in terms of increasing the fees. Recognizing that we've got into a position where we're taking such a large percentage of the revenue that we get from this that we can't back off too far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to reduce the 2025 ATCO gas franchise fee to 11.5%. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess for administration, my question would be the desire to try and get as close to the projected revenues as possible. But in looking at the 2024 numbers, we're still at a point where it seems like that's hard to do because these sorts of things vary on a month-to-month basis. So is it possible to say we would like to get X amount and that this is the percentile that we need to shoot for in order to get there by the end of the year? Or is that still something that's susceptible to the swings of the energy market?
Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you to all of council. So it would still be susceptible so the franchise fees are based on revenues derived through to the energy company in the community from the town of Hinton. So they're forecasting those and we're in turn forecasting. So the calculator that we do use is provided by the provider, and it is the closest that we can get using the estimates and all of the projections.
Yeah, so if I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
This is one of those areas where if I could be guaranteed that we were actually going to hit a specific number based on a certain percentage, I would actually support the motion that's on the floor. But given the fact that it is still susceptible to the swings of the energy market and we're not guaranteed to necessarily hit that, I'd actually like to be conservative and keep the percentile that we have in place. That again, because I think that's the most likely thing to get us to the area that we've projected in terms of revenues. And we can see that there are certain years where the projected revenues that we thought we were going to have actually gone down. And if we're not conservative enough with our budgeting process, we may actually find ourselves in a position of trying to make up a certain amount of money because the forecasted revenues haven't hit what we thought that they would hit. So in this case, I'm more content to keep the percentile where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not support this motion. It is not a hidden tax. Anybody who gets a bill can see this amount on their bill. I do have a question for administration. How often is this fee collected? Is it monthly? Is it 4 times a year? And also, where does this money go? Does it go into general revenue? Thank you.
Ms. Bourbeau.
Through to all of council, we receive monthly deposits from the energy companies. So it comes into us monthly, billed to the customer monthly, and then is remitted to us monthly. There is about a 30-day lag in the receipt of it. And it goes to general revenues. So we are looking at where we're at for projections and budget amounts for franchise fees and offsetting any potential tax increases using this revenue.
Councillor Race, follow up.
I do. Have we become dependent on this franchise fee? Like if general revenue did not get this monies, would that upset the apple cart?
Ms. Bourbeau.
Through to all of council. So the overall municipal budget, operating budget it's one large pool. We do look at it as all of these revenue sources. We can do some further segmentation and allocations of amounts, but in general, we to help spending to be as concise and trackable as followed is we try to just keep it all very consistent. So franchise fees do have their own 2 lines within our budget, one for each energy provider. If we were to allocate those to a certain area, it wouldn't affect the tax rate so much because it's still the same municipal budget that it's supporting.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to be speaking in favor of the proposed motion either. I don't think that revenue neutral is a responsible perspective to take when looking at franchise fees. Inflation continues to impact everybody, including the town of Hinton. without increasing levels of service, the town of Hinton still needs to collect additional revenue just to match inflation to be able to carry the same levels of service. And I feel by making it revenue neutral, that additional revenue that needs to be collected gets shifted over to the municipal tax roll. And I don't think that collecting this through municipal taxes rather than through the franchise fee is a reasonable way to go about it. As was discussed previously at standing, franchise fees are somewhat user pay. It's based, there's a base value and then it's on the amount used. So the larger users pay a larger percentage. And the other thing that was brought to my attention last week that I hadn't considered before is that other institutions who are exempt from municipal taxation do have to pay the municipal franchise fees. So that means we can collect revenue through this system from institutions like hospitals, schools, other government institutions that don't pay municipal taxation. So I think this is a fine way to do it, and it allows us to collect proportionally from the market who doesn't otherwise contribute or utilizes more of the service than the average municipal taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to reduce the 2025 ATCO gas franchise fee to 11.5%. Is there any further discussion from council? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is defeated 6-1 with Councillor Taylor voting in favor. Council, would anyone else like to take a crack at item 6.1 on the agenda this evening? Councillor Chambers.
I'd like to make the motion that council direct administration to maintain the 12% franchise fee with ATCO.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to maintain the 12% franchise fee with ATCO Gas. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried 6-1 with Councillor Taylor voting against. Council, is there anything further for item 6.1 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.2, Fortis Alberta Electric 2025 franchise fee. Ms. Bourbeau, do you have anything further to add?
Thank you, Council. Just wanting clarifying questions that arose from committees. So the question was asked on the 2023 Town of Hinton franchise fee revenue forecast was to be $1,321,000. And the actual revenue received for 2023 was $1,340,000. So just $19,000 difference in that. So projections were quite close. The second question that was asked is what would the franchise fee have to be revenue neutral? And that would be at 11.15%. Recommended action before council this evening is to maintain the 11.73% franchise fee with Fortis Alberta.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbeau. Council? Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to move the council direct administration to maintain the 11.73 franchise fee with Fortis Alberta. I don't need to speak to it, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to maintain the 11.73% franchise fee with Fortis Alberta. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried 6-1 with Councillor Taylor voting against. Council, is there anything further for item 6.2 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.3, Municipal Internship Program. CEO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. We are bringing forward the Municipal Internship Program. This is a grant that typically comes out every year through the Alberta Community Partnership. They are soliciting some applications for the 2025-2026 term. This is a very well-established internship program in the municipal world. The internship is an 18-month program that allows the participants to work under the mentorship of municipal professionals and develop a broad understanding of municipal government and develop skills and competencies in the industry. So this program, I have been both an intern and an intern supervisor, I can say that this is a very good program. As an organization, it's a give and take where the organization needs to be committed to the development of this individual. But it's also, we do expect something back in terms of their labor and their work. I would say that this position would be well utilized. We are, as administration, I would say, falling behind on our action pending. These things are coming up quicker than we're able to knock them off. I believe we're on to 6 pages of outstanding action items. So, I don't think there would be any concern of this position not being fully utilized to attack the motions of council as well as our tactical plan. When it comes to the costs of hosting the internship, the province and the grant is a $60,000 grant, and this is based on a 18-month term. So this crosses over into 2 budget cycles. For the 2025 budget, we would be in a surplus position of approximately 11,500. That 11,500 would be used to offset the cost for 2026, but that's where the majority, or that's where the cost will come into place of an estimated 58,900. So that's all I have for council today. If council was to make the recommended action, which is to direct administration to apply, we would see this as an OBC in the budget for council to approve, and we would likely have an intern starting sometime in May of 2025.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have that's grown out of our last standing committee meeting really centers around balancing that 2026 cost versus trying to make some gains from the organization's perspective. So at a high level, if this internship program weren't on the table, would administration need additional personnel to accomplish the objectives of council of the day? Is really my question.
CEO Panasic.
To the mayor, to members of council, I guess it would be a decision of how quickly we want to get these things done. We can get all 6 pages of the action pending, our tactical plan, any outstanding motions that happen from now until they are complete, but new ones will pop up. Certainly, it's just, it's a matter of prioritization, and it's a matter of how quickly do we want these things done, right? We as administration know that we have all of those items need to be complete. That's a lot of outstanding items that I don't think will be done in a short period of time. So we also, that's gonna, I think we'll have to have there may be a need for a discussion on how much we're going to do in it, but I don't want to get into a position of now we're going through our action pending list and starting to remove items because our eyes were a little bit too big for our stomach. So I think it's just a matter of prioritization. Is this position absolutely critical to accomplishing our priorities? No, I would say that as administration, we'll prioritize and we'll get these high level tactical items and strategic items completed first, and we'll work our way through the list over a period of time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillors, Councillor Taylor.
So we're just approving for you to put an application in, and then during the budgeting process, we'll approve the funding for this based on all our other priorities.
CEO Panasic.
Correct. That's what you said. Said OBC.
Yeah, through the mayor to members of council, that's correct. But I would say that if council is going to make a motion for us to put in an application, we should be willing to see this through for the next 2 years, because it's a multi-year commitment, and even the commitment we make in 25, it's really not going to affect our budget in 2025, but it will be in 26. So this is a multi-year commitment. I would say that, if council if council likes this idea, to make the motion and to be willing to include that in the budget, but I don't want, what I wouldn't want is for administration to make the application because they would be making a decision prior to budget, and then for us to go back to the granting agency and say, sorry, but we're actually not interested. That doesn't establish a very good relationship. So I would say that if council would like to go down this road, we do so now when we put our weight behind it at this time.
Yeah, let's follow up, please.
Go right ahead.
So you're asking us to approve an expenditure for a sort of non-critical thing outside of a budget process. I guess the question would be, if this is a long-standing program, why didn't we discuss it during last year's budget cycle?
CO Panasic?
Through the mayor to members of council, the APC program is open to all sorts of different things. So in the municipal internship program is one. We are currently not going to be eligible for the other stream because we received, and we didn't know this at the time, but $200,000 through another stream of the Alberta Community Partnership Grant for the water treatment plant and doing some preliminary engineering on that work. So we now cannot reapply for that same grant because we have an outstanding project. So this is the one that we would be eligible for. And so that's the reason. The other reason I would say is that typically when we're talking about this at budget, this is not a 2024 budget item. This is a 2025, and primarily this is actually a 2026 budget item. So this is ahead of budgetary decisions that council can consider. And we also don't know that what is the funding that will be made available through the program on a year-to-year basis. So there's a few reasons, but typically when these come available at around this time of year, it's brought forward at this time of year.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have two related questions. Just in short, CAO, if you could, for the community members who might be watching, we, or at least some of us on council who've seen our municipal interns come through the municipality before, what are the sorts of things that the community might see them helping out with on administration's part? Like, my assumption is based on what we've seen before, they'll be rotating through different departments, getting some experiences. And then based on your expertise, do you feel that the overall cost to the community, which really, if we're going to look at it, is about, $58,900, are we getting that value based on that rotation?
CO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So yes, this position has a requirement to go through all of the different departments, and typically the intern will be put on a project basis, temporary project basis. There is some element of learning of all of these different departments, but a lot of what we try to do as administration is to get the intern involved in some of the files. A lot of the files that come forward, through an action pending list, for example, of, let's say, a new policy or bylaw, those types of projects that come up that we think would be good learning opportunities, those would be delegated to the intern. So I'd say that they provide a lot of resources. These are, bright, educated, young people that come to the community, with the grant. I would say that this is absolutely a good value for the money as a subsidized program to provide some labor at a significantly reduced cost.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just that I'm willing to make the recommended action and move that council directs administration to make an application to the Alberta Community Partnership Grant Municipal Internship Program for an administrative intern for the 2025-2026 term. And if I may,
go ahead.
I struggled with this one. I think really because of the hit to the 2026 budget, $58,000. It's not insubstantial. I mean, we're getting close to about 0.5% there in terms of operational revenues. But at the end of the day, we've seen the success of this program in the community before, and the value that it adds to the organization. So this is one of those areas where I trust and respect the opinion of administration that this will help facilitate efficient movement of files through the town's portfolio. And at this point, I'm willing to support it and see what the rest of council has to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Race, did you still want to be in the queue there? Yes.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. CAO, are these interns bringing new knowledge into our organization?
Zio Panasic?
Through the mayor to members of council, I would say yes, these are fresh university graduates. So, they're certainly going to come with some fresh ideas to the table. They're very educated, very bright, but very inexperienced.
Okay. And my other question is, would you happen to know how many of these interns have in the past remained in our organization?
Zio Panasic?
To my knowledge, the town of Hinton, at least in recent memory, has had 2, and we have retained both of those interns in our organization after their internship was done. They have come in and filled other roles.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Thank you, Zio Panasic. Councillor Stashik?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to be speaking in favor of the proposed motion. This is something that I've thought about too, and realizing the understanding the value of municipal intern and the importance of hosting municipal interns so that they can get some real world experience. I actually believe that if we're going to invest nearly $60,000 of taxpayer dollars, I would sooner see it invested in recruiting, hiring, and retaining and experienced, trained individuals who are actually coming to fill known gaps in the administrative organization. I feel that's a more important thing to focus on rather than bringing in inexperienced green intern who's basically going to be cycling through departments and learning about town administration. I think we've got some things that we're trying to get off the ground that we need to move forward. And I think that's going to be more effective to move those forward if we've got those trained, experienced personnel coming to the organization ready to hit the ground running. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Haas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm struggling with this one myself too. I see the benefits, but I also see the budgetary impact. My question to administration, we're talking about how it may value, the position may bring value to trying to reduce the action items. My only question then is how much does it add to our current staffing with the teachings, because I imagine there's reporting that's involved in it. There's like mentorship and things like that. So I guess I'm trying to balance, it might in one way help with the action items, but is that going to add to administration on their duties that would take away from that action list, to the intern? So any comments on that?
Zio Panasic?
Through the mayor to members of council, there's certainly a degree of that. Again, with an inexperienced person, this is also a commitment to the individual and having them. This is an important program, and that mentorship of this person is important. That also takes time, but generally, the internship work plan, you have to submit that to the province. That's I would say negligible amount of work, I believe. One time a year, you go to Edmonton, as this is a municipal affairs program, and you'll go and work through the internship orientation process, things like that. So, there's certainly administrative time going through all the departments. There's going to be it'll be necessary for the directors to be able to teach this intern and provide some of their experience and knowledge onto this person. So there of course is going to be some administrative time and effort put into this person as well.
Okay, and if I may have one follow-up.
Go ahead.
And I don't disagree with Councillor Stashik's comment on, I too would prefer, honestly, if we need this to improve and to recruit experienced staff, but is that the plan of administration in this coming budgets? Are we looking at adding additional staff? I know I don't want to go into the budget, but is that the plan? Because I see possible then missed opportunity potentially with this. If we're not going to add staff, stay remain, then maybe this is the way to go, even though they might not stick with us. But is that administration's at all in their plan coming forward for next budget?
CEO Panasic?
Through the mayor to members of council, typically our process is all of our OBCs and CPPs, which would include additional positions. Those will all come to me probably in about a week or two. And then I will, I'll need to take a look at all of those OBCs, filter them out. And senior leadership needs to take a look at those and decide which ones are necessary for us to move forward, including new positions. So we haven't done that work, so I can't say that this is the specific plan going forward. But generally I would say that this won't necessarily interfere with any plans on that. Because again, this is a temporary position. This is 18 months at a maximum. And the typical intern will spend 1 year, so May to May, and then they should be looking for another position if you're not willing to take them internally. So, this is a very temporary thing. This isn't something that we would look at to fill a long-term need that you would need experienced staff for.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor House. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I don't think I'll support this. I have difficulty approving something like this outside of a budget cycle, as this is a significant cost to the taxpayers. I think we have to organize our expenditures in a way that minimizes cost to the ratepayer. One of the ways to do that is rank this up against all the other things that we have to pay for. And we do that for non-critical expenditures at budget time. If it was a critical thing like a water break like Calgary or something, sure, we'd have to pay for it. But it's only when we get that 10% tax increase and we can see that we've got this expenditure for this and where this ranks against the other things for non-critical things that we can see where it stacks up. So times are tough. Taxpayers are facing many costs. They've come out of COVID and come out of the fire situation. So that's what I think. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess CAO, my question stems out of some of the logic around Councillor Ostashik's counter argument and counterpoint. From an administrational standpoint, looking at the overall cost to the town, that would be looking at putting in about $58,900. Is this the best use of money comparatively, or, and forgive the oversimplification, for an additional, say, 60,000 a year, that could be quite a high level. I would expect a high level expert that could be hired in lieu of that if council was willing to invest more funding if there was a greater gap in the organization identified. Where do you see the needs more appropriately spent right now? Supporting this intern position, or maybe doing a deep dive and finding out if maybe gap analysis is more appropriate in this case?
CEO Panasic?
Talking at a very high level, adding a new staff member on a permanent basis is a very, very big decision, and one that I think you need to be very, very diligent about how you do that, because this isn't a 1-year expense. This is something that the municipality is likely to carry on probably forever. Right. And it's a different decision-making metric that or filter that I would apply to those types of positions, because, that's going to be there for years and years. This is more of just a temporary mechanism that is, half grant funded, and it provides us some immediate relief. Am I willing to, I wouldn't be willing at this point in time to say, council, we need more staff in order to address this backlog, because that's a permanent, that's a permanent decision to solve a short-term issue that we see, right? So I don't know if I'd be willing to say that at this point in time, but certainly on a temporary subsidized program, I think that we can certainly see some value from it as a municipality.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That helps.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Thank you, CO Panasic. Councillor Race, I see you there, but we're going to Councillor Chambers first here.
Thank you through the
I'm
mayor.
good, sir.
I look at this from a perspective of, I mean, we can look at it as a $58,000 cost, but we also have to look at it as $60,000 of free help for that 6-page list of things that we need to look at. And I do think we have an accountability to showcase our town to professionals, to grow professionals, just in general, have people interested in getting into municipalities, looking at the different types of administration. I think that if administration didn't feel that this position would be useful, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I understand the concerns, and I definitely have spent a lot of time thinking about it since committee. There was a lot of good discussion there. But I do strongly support the motion that's on the table at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Race, were you still interested in being in the queue?
Thank you, sir. I will support this motion. I feel that this is a wonderful opportunity for us as a municipality. I've actually heard of a brilliant young intern who actually went on to become a CAO. So in a wonderful municipality. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Race. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that the community, Hinton, has acquired ACP funding in the past to partially fund a contract employee to provide services to complete a specific task. If the appetite of council is not to apply to this for use as a municipal intern, is that a possibility that it could be diverted in a different way to a contract employee for a set period of time to provide a defined task for the town, as has been done in the past, is my understanding?
CO Panasic.
Just a point of clarification. Are you speaking about the 58,000 in 2026 to reallocate those dollars? Or are you speaking to the $60,000 that would be provided by the province in support of this? Because
Councillor Ostashik.
Respond.
Yes.
The grant funding specifically to utilize it to hire a contract employee for some type of specific task that the town needs to accomplish for perhaps a 1-year contract, rather than using it for a municipal intern program.
Through the mayor to member of the council, no, this is specific to a municipal intern. So that's what the funding is for. That's what the stream is intended for. So we can't reallocate the dollars. It has to go towards the internship position.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, the motion on the floor is that council directs administration to make an application to the Alberta Community Partnership Grant Municipal Internship Program for an administrative intern for the 25-26 term. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor voting against by hand, and that motion is carried 5-2 with Councillors Taylor and Ostashik voting against. Council, is there anything further for item 6.3 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to item 6.4, bursary intake period extension. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I will turn this over to Ms. Bourbeau.
Thank you to all of council. So this item is before you. It's purely as a consideration. We have had some intake and applications received for the bursary program. This is only before you this evening, as our community has been quite busy for the month of August when we had everything approved and released. We still agree that September 23rd annually is a good date for cutoff. It allows the packages to be vetted through and be presented to the committee members ahead of budget and all of the other very hectic time periods. We're just here exploring if council would like us to extend the intake period for this year only, just to allow some additional messaging to go out to agencies and perhaps encourage or allow more applications to come through for this, our first year. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Barbeau. If I may ask, how many applicants have we had so far in the program?
Through to all of council, we have had 2, but there have been a number of inquiries, and we haven't seen applications come through from the inquiries.
Is it anticipated by administration that if the deadline were extended, that some of those inquiries would turn into applications?
I do not know. I wear my heart on my sleeve often, and I thought perhaps longer time in our first year would give us more messaging time, but it's completely at the will of council.
Thank you, Ms. Bourbon. And yes, of course, it was a very busy time when these announcements came out, and it's easy to understand how the public would have missed this announcement on this bursary. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that council direct administration to extend the 2024 intake period for the Trans Mountain Pipeline LP bursary to October 17th, 2024. And in my mind, there's a very low threat to making this motion. I don't see much of a downside other than giving potential organizations a chance to apply for funding and get involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. So council, the motion on the floor is the council direct administration to extend the 2024 intake period for the Trans Mountain Pipeline LP bursary to October 17th, 2024. I've got Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. This doesn't delay the current applicants that have applied at all, their funding, does it?
Ms. Borbo?
Through to all of council. So the only delay would be that it would be coming to the selection committee approximately 3 weeks later, but we would still be able to ensure that payments were released prior to the end of this semester, as we know that the intent of this is to remove any financial barriers as well as other barriers that they may have faced in making the decision to go to school.
Okay, so there's no the other applicants are jeopardize their schooling or anything like that with extending this.
Ms. Borbo?
Through to all of council, I don't know of any jeopardy. I have looked at the applicants that we have received. They both appear very qualified, but that is for committee to make the recommendation. Essentially, we would be approximately a 3 week to up to a month delay. So for funds being released.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Thank you, Ms. Borbo. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What happens with the additional available bursary dollars if it's not fully subscribed?
Ms. Borbo?
Through to all of council. So the policy was written so that the maximum amount is $50,400, and that's running from 2024 through to 2028. So to allow for an average of 3.6 applicants, so 3 or 4 applicants in a year. The policy also reads that it expires upon full subscription of the $50,400. If there was still monies left over at the end of 2028, then it would be decision of council working with the community agreement that we've signed with Trans Mountain to extend that further and continue with, because this money was allocated to the community for removal of barriers for post-secondary education in the pipeline industry.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Magoon.
Sorry, and I apologize. It's important enough that I want to get clarification. But for any of those who are successful in applying through this intake, it's not anticipated that will affect their ability to be successful in using those funds to go into their programs, correct? At their various organizations.
Ms. Borbo?
Through to all of council, I'm not aware, nor have I been made aware of any restrictions. There's no one, to my knowledge, waiting for the money in order to proceed with their post-secondary studies.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borbo. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is a council direct administration to extend the 2024 intake period for the Trans Mountain Pipeline LP bursary to October 17th, 2024. Counselor Taylor.
I'm going to vote in favor of this because I think this will help, and I'm so pleased to have an action item that I can vote in favor of. Thank you.
Happy to make your day, Counselor Taylor. Council, is there anything further for this discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Counselor Taylor voting in favor by hand, and that is carried 7-0. Oh, okay. Okay, Council, is there anything further for item 6.4 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we will move to item 6.5, notice of motion, Gerard Redmond Pickleball Courts. And a reminder, Council, prior to moving into this item, we are going to have a 11.1 legal advice discussion in closed session. So I'll be looking for a motion to move into closed at this time. Councillor Hawes.
I move to move into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, the motion is that Council move into closed session at 5:35 p.m. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we will call the question. Councilors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor in favor by hand, and that motion is carried unanimously. We are headed into closed. Thank you. And we will return to the regular council meeting for September 17th, 2024 at 5:48 p.m. We are on item 6.5 on our agenda this evening, notice of motion, Gerard Redmond Pickleball Courts. Councillor Magoon. Before you go, Councillor Magoon, we just have our tech folks, the delegate list is not coming up properly when they queue. They're going straight to live microphones. Could we get back to a queue, please? Councillor Magoon, give that a try again, please. There we go. Thank you very much. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council direct administration to return a report to the committee of the whole meeting in October dealing with the issue of noise at the Gerard Redmond Pickleball Courts. And then if I may speak to it, Mr. Mayor.
Go right ahead.
Just in short, I appreciate the support that everybody's, brought to the table in terms of exploring this item. And especially, I want to make sure to express my appreciation to Councillor Taylor. I know he certainly, I don't want this to seem like this was any solo brainchild of myself. I think everybody just wanted to take a little bit of time to think about what the impact of bringing a report back to council might be. And I would also like to express my appreciation for Mr. Gorner in just being thoughtful and measured in how he brings something that clearly is personal and frustrating to the table. Again, I think we could use more of that in our society as a whole. So thank you very much. For myself, I think there's some low-hanging fruit, as has been said, in terms of looking at this issue and trying to make life better for everybody. So in short, I'll leave it at that. And hopefully there's some more work to do at a committee of the whole meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to return a report to a committee of the whole meeting in October dealing with the issue of noise at the Gerard Redmond Pickleball Courts. Is there any discussion? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm in favor of looking at this. I think one of the things that I was made aware of that I wasn't made aware of before was sort of the decibel information that you brought forward, and how it's higher than what a lot of most communities would tolerate, or how it's higher than what you expected when you moved into the area. And then looking at a lot of the options here, I think we have a lot of options to choose from. And I don't know which ones are going to be reasonable, but I'm sure that we can come up with something that'll mitigate the noise. Do we have to mitigate the noise completely? I don't think so, because you still moved into the neighborhood and there was a tennis court there. But I believe we have to mitigate the noise below, hopefully below the 55 decibel limit that you mentioned before, and hopefully quite a bit below it, so you can, your neighbors can enjoy the area the way you thought you could when you moved in. I think we have some options where we can do that. So I look forward to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, the motion on the floor is that council direct administration to return a report to a committee of the whole meeting in October dealing with the issue of noise at the Gerard Redmond Pickleball Courts. Is there any further discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor in favor by thumb, and that motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, on this, because we're on this matter, I have a quick question and clarification, I guess. In regards to the volleyball nets, it was kind of brought to the attention of administration last time. The thought was that they weren't, that was not a service that area provided, but my understanding based on some correspondence that there are actual holes there, just no nets. So so do we provide volleyball in that area? Don't we? I guess that's because there was some confusion on that because it sounded like we didn't, but I guess do we?
CO Panasic.
Through the mayor, I wouldn't say that we provide volleyball. I would say that we provided 2 volleyball poles for a net many years ago, and more for the schools that they used to put their own nets on. They used to take them off. So I mean, it is set up there. It is established. So if people want to use that as a public use, I don't see any reason that we wouldn't allow that. But those poles are there for a volleyball net. It just has been used very infrequently to my knowledge.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, CO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, is there anything further for item 6.5 on the agenda this evening? Seeing nothing, we'll move to section 7 of the agenda, correspondence. And would any councillors like to ask some questions or accept? Thank you. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I do have a quick question. I appreciate Municipal Affairs has provided us with a $500,000 grant for 2025 fire service, but this is particularly for training of our members. Is that correct? It's not in fire smarting. It's not in any of that work, but it's specifically training our current fire department.
Chief DeBodrop.
To the chair, to all of council, that is correct. It is specifically for training in the 1001 standard, 1002 standard, which is pump operations. It's the bread and butter type training for structural firefighting. And we've partnered with the town of Edson, town of Jasper, and Greenview County to make application for that particular grant to get more of a regional training budget and a greater chance of getting funding through the province for that training.
Okay, so if I may follow up then, so this is not 500,000 just for the town of Hinton, it's for the surrounding areas, the ones you mentioned.
Through the chair, that's 500,000 for the entire province of Alberta.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So 440 fire departments.
Oh, okay. So, okay. That's good clarification. Thank you for that. So,
thank you, Chief. That is good clarification. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just further to that, Chief, so things like training, resources, manuals, the cost of conducting training, that would all be covered by that sort of grant?
Chief DeBodrop.
Through the chair, that would partially cover that. We also, on an annual basis, budget for support materials for our training of our firefighters.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Councillor Haas.
I got to say, now that you've said that and clarified that, it's a little disappointing because it seems like for 440 fire departments, the only 500,000 for training seems like not a lot. With the state that we've been in, in fire emergency and stuff. So it kind of concerns me a little bit that because I thought this was for us, and then I thought it was for the region, but that's for 440 the fire department. So it just kind of a little concerning of how much effort is the province supporting that fire services training in our province with all the issues we've had. So just a statement, a comment. I mean, I'm glad we got some monies, but it doesn't seem like a lot. It seems like it won't go very far. So thank you.
Chief DeBodrop.
Through the chair, that is an issue every year at the Fire Chiefs Conference, trying to obtain more funding from the province, not just for fire training, but also for emergency management and the whole emergency response world. There's very, very limited funding, and there is a great reliance on municipalities to provide that funding, where really it is well, firefighting is a municipal responsibility, but we always seek for more support from the province and from the fire commissioner's office.
Councillor Haas.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I mean, yeah, because I mean, we're also taking the training and providing services in the province. And, you know, if there's a limited amount, then we as a municipality are training our staff, not only for fires in Hinton, but elsewhere as well. You know, I know we get paid for that, which is great, but that's from the municipality too. That's not from the province necessarily. So yeah, it's just interesting. That's all the, you know, with all the talk, which makes me, I think, again, happy that we're bringing that resolution to our to AM conference as well, because I think we do need more municipal presence in planning for that and funds and things like that, you know, because that just doesn't seem right. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Does council have any other questions arising from the information package, or would council like to accept the information package or the correspondence package, sorry, for information? Councillor Chambers.
I'd like to make the motion that we accept the information items as presented.
Correspondence, please.
Sorry, for information.
Thank you. And council, the motion on the floor is that council accept the correspondence for information. Any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor in favor by hand, and that is carried unanimously. That will take us to section 8 of the agenda this evening, information items, and item 8.1, Town of Hinton social service level comparison analysis. Would council like to accept for information or have any questions? Councillor Chambers. CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor to members of council. So we just wanted to provide the report alongside the presentation, but the intent is that October 1st or at our next committee of the whole meeting, we will be bringing this report back alongside the level of service and renewing that discussion.
Councillor Taylor.
When might we see the explanation of the contradiction in financial information?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor, the intent would be at the committee of the whole meeting.
In October.
And if we can provide that a little bit earlier, we certainly will.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Thank you, CEO Panasic. Would any councillors like to make a motion accepting the 8.1 for information? Thank you, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council accept information items 8.1 and 8.2 for information.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Secretary, we're just going to have to change that. Thank you very much. While we're waiting, Councillor Taylor.
Did we pay full price for that report that provided contradictory information?
CEO Panasic.
Through the mayor, yes, we did.
Thank you, CEO Panasic. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Ooh, was there, and now it's gone again. Council, the motion on the floor is that council accepts 8.1 and 8.2 for information. Is there any discussion? Seeing nothing, we'll call the question. Councillors, please vote now. Councillor Taylor voting in favor by hand. That motion is carried unanimously. That will take us to item 8.2 of the agenda today, and it is a proclamation from the town of Hinton in support of Rail Safety Week. Whereas Rail Safety Week is to be held across Canada from September 23rd to 29th, 2024, whereas 229 railway crossing and trespassing incidents occurred in Canada in 2023, resulting in 66 avoidable fatalities and 39 avoidable serious injuries. Whereas educating and informing the public about rail safety, reminding the public that railway rights of way are private property, enhancing public awareness of the dangers associated with highway rail grade crossings, ensuring pedestrians and motorists are looking and listening while near railways, and obeying established traffic laws will reduce the number of avoidable fatalities and injuries caused by incidents involving trains and citizens. And whereas Operation Lifesaver is a public-private partnership whose aim is to work with the public, rail industry, governments, police services, media, and others to raise rail safety awareness. Whereas CN and Operation Lifesaver have requested City Council adopt this resolution in support of its ongoing efforts to raise awareness, save lives, and prevent injuries in communities, including our municipality. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Nissen, on behalf of Council and the Town of Hinton, do hereby proclaim the week of September 23rd to 29th, 2024 as Rail Safety Week. Thank you. And that will take us to section 9 of the agenda this evening, notices of motion. CAO Panasik, are there any notices of motion this week?
They're not.
Thank you, CAO. We'll go to section 10, reporting. Council reports. We'll start with Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The weekend was, or Saturday was very busy at the museum. It was time to clean up the grounds and the flower beds, and I found myself weeding a flower bed with a wonderful citizen from Hinton. It was a very lively weekend. They had a birthday party, so there's a ton of little kids running around happy and doing little scavenger hunts, and it was just awesome. Met some very nice people from Washington. They came to visit our museum. We had a wonderful discussion, and they think our town is absolutely lovely. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to attend the Firefighters Appreciation Dinner on Thursday evening of last week. Got to enjoy a very nice meal with our Hinton Fire Department and have them presented with some very nice tokens of appreciation, some bunker gear backpacks. Is that correct? Yeah, very interesting backpacks. Very cool. I appreciated the evening and I had a great time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also was lucky enough to attend the Firefighters Appreciation Dinner. I'd just like to thank everybody who had a hand in organizing it. It was a very lovely evening. And then wearing my other hat, but it has to do with council and one of the areas that we have sort of our eye on with budget coming up. I was able to sit down with the museum as well and talk about various levels of programming and opportunities that are afforded to students and schools in our community. It was a very good discussion. One of the nice things was Margaret really wanted to drill down into some of the updates to the curriculum that are coming up still as well, but also some of the areas of growth for various grade levels that she feels we could do better on. So it was a good conversation as a stakeholder to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. Yes, Councillor Taylor's got a question for Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas, you'll have to wait. Councillor Taylor.
Since a significant number of the documented people that attend the museum are from the school system, did you discuss perhaps the school system paying part of the funding for the museum?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things Margaret wanted to discuss was cost efficiencies, really through two routes. One of them being, of course, low, very easy routes like simply increasing the cost of programs based on what their costs are. But as a principal, again, with that other hat on, one of the things that I had suggested might be easy. One of their high level costs is, as silly as it sounds, is photocopying. Copier costs are very expensive, toner, those sorts of things. And there's, I feel, an economy of savings to be found if we partner with the museum to front load some of those costs for them. Prep photocopying that needs to be done, especially when it involves programs that come to the school, it just saves their costs overall, right? We're a bigger organization comparative to the museum, so we can bear those costs with some savings. So.
May I?
Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
So we train 600 of your students and you're going to give us photocopying costs?
Councillor Magoon.
If I may be direct, I think that is at best, and I'll be again direct. I think that's insulting to reduce a museum's role in a community to that. Because by that same train of thought, then you could look at the recreation programs that the town of Hinton offers, and we know that there's no recreation center in the province that operates at cost. So the town is also burdening those costs. So then you could say and argue that the town of Hinton is training the physical fitness of students from a recreational standpoint, and that they're burdening that cost as well. And again, for myself, from an education standpoint, I find it insulting.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon, and thank you, Councillor Taylor. We're not going to debate this item tonight. This is here for reporting. Councillor Haas with your councillor reporting.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to get the firefighters appreciation, and I do apologize. I was out of town, but I did hear it was a great night. I did have the opportunity, though, to attend the open house that we had last week as well, which was, I believe, quite well attended, you know, and very respectful. Great conversation we had, and a lot of the people that attended had a great understanding, you know, despite no one wants increases, but understand the purpose and the behind it. So it was a great evening. You know, I think there was some value to having the health providers there as well. Even though a lot of attention was on the utilities, but there were still people that took that in. So other than that, I have a BBOC, Beaver Boardwalk Oversight Committee meeting tomorrow evening, and then I have the library board, and then of course we have the AM conference next week. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you. I also was able to attend the firefighters dinner, and the food was absolutely incredible. That was provided by the Legion, so that was very nice. Was also at the open house. Quite surprised actually by a lot of the things that I learned from some of the primary care and the healthcare crew. There were some good learnings for me to go through that for myself and for the senior population. Just a few offerings. I didn't know certain things, so definitely was some good information that was provided. And also will be attending the Alberta Municipalities Conference next week.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, two things. I did attend the open house. And after the open house, there was some debate on the presentation styles, whether you go for a public presentation or whether you go for, like we did, a question and answer for citizens. And I think that either are acceptable ways, but in this increasingly polarized, divisive society, there's a greater chance in a lot of these things, and when this is my experience coming up, that you're going to get people that are going to dominate these things. And the best way one of the ways to protect against that and get the most number of people to answer questions is the format that we do. So I support that format, and I think that's an acceptable format to use in this society that we live in right now. So that was one comment I heard after the format, after the meeting. At the meeting, lots of people coming with legitimate questions. I, like you, would answer them the best of my ability, and then I would turn them over to administration for detailed answers. It didn't take long to get to that stage for me, but no, I think there are a lot of people that came with honest questions that got good answers to those questions. Dozens of people in the 2 hours that I was there, at least a dozen that I talked to. The other thing that I'd like to mention is on September 5th, council was directly criticized for our lack of attention to our fire vulnerability. And that was done publicly. And I take exception to, I take issue with that assertion that we have a lack of attention to our fire vulnerability. I think we've been aggressively pushing the fire prevention risk management for a long time. All of council is well aware that we live in a town surrounded by forests, and we're one of the communities that are most at risk to wildfires. And to help citizens make constructive ideas or suggestions on where we can improve, I want to list some of the key activities we've been engaged in, because I don't know that we've done a thorough job of explaining that publicly. I've tried to make a thorough list, and Max helped a bit. So some of the things we've done is working on the long-term fire smart objectives. A significant portion of that 10-year plan is being completed. In the last month alone, $600,000 of fire smart prevention grant Applications have been initiated, including the Fire Smart Plan, on-ground Fire Smart work, and funds for public education. 2, protecting critical infrastructure in the town from the effects of fire and building in resiliency, including our water systems. You want the hydrants and the taps to work in an emergency, including a fire. And we're trying to work and make sure that that occurs. 3, pushing for the creation of a provincial fire prevention committee to give municipalities more of a say in wildfire management in their local area. 4, communicating with provincial government agencies on related topics, including vegetation management on the highway bypass along the southeastern edge of town to create a fire buffer. 5, improving and modernizing our firefighting equipment. Last year alone, we bought $260,000 worth of sprinkler protection units and a more modern $470,000 fire bush buggy to help us fight wildfires encroaching on urban areas, which will also improve our ability to help our other communities during a crisis. In fact, our staff and equipment in the last year were sent to fires in Seymour twice, Fort McMurray, and Jasper once. 6, working with and supporting local forest industries in efforts to manage beetle and high-risk stands around Hinton. And 7, individual councillors have taken numerous field trips with fellow citizens and outside experts to get new ideas and study best practices to ensure that we have the best possible plan. So we have paid utmost attention to our fire prevention and vulnerability. And of course, there's much more to be done. And hopefully these ideas and comments about what we're doing will help folks come to us with more ideas on how to even get better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And for myself, yes, last week, as was mentioned by other councillors, we had our open house to discuss utility rate options and as well as the healthcare situation here in Hinton. I did receive quite a bit of feedback on the format. I was very happy with the format. I thought it was very informative, and I want to thank administration for putting that on. I also got feedback from our MLA, Martin Long, who was at the open house discussing healthcare with our citizens. And he said that it was a great format for bringing meaningful discussion and getting information out in the community. And he hopes that other communities will follow our lead on that front. On Thursday, 12th September, we had a healthcare worker appreciation barbecue put on by the Attraction and Retention Committee of Hinton, ARCH. It was absolutely stellar timing as we had a number in the 30 range of medical students from the U of A in town that week doing part of their program, and we had a lot of great uptake. That evening, on last Thursday, we also had the firefighter appreciation dinner, and one of the things I learned leading up to that was some of our utility folks here in Hinton were actually in Jasper on SCBAs doing critical infrastructure work during those fires. It wasn't just our firefighters. So incredibly proud of the staff and the responders that we have here in Hinton. Absolutely incredible. And then on Friday the 13th, sounds like an unlucky day, but it certainly wasn't. We had an Evergreen board meeting for the Evergreens Foundation, and I was able to wrangle the entire board out to Randy Smith's retirement down at FCSS, as he has done just an absolute ton of good for our seniors here in this community, and it was wonderful to see him off right. And next week, as was mentioned, we do have the Alberta Munis Conference. Councillor Haas and myself both have a confirmed meeting with Minister Lagrange, and Councillor Chambers and myself have a confirmed meeting with Minister McIver, and possibly more to follow. And with that, we'll go to the CAO for reporting. CAO Panasic.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing to report.
Thank you, CAO Panasic. And Section 11 closed session has been completed. We will be at Section 12 adjournment. And would any councillor like to end this? Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
I'd like to make a motion for adjournment at 6:16 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Council, the motion on the floor is that council adjourn the meeting at 6:16 p.m. Councillors, please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Cole, I can't believe you